Hi, I'm Trisha Dalton. I'm 33 years old, I live in Portland, Oregon, and I've spent the last 5 years working as a senior claims analyst in a cubicle that smells faintly like toner and regret. If you're listening to this, it probably means you've felt it too. That quiet shift, that sudden jolt when a moment slices your life into before and after. For me, that moment came on a Tuesday afternoon, right between reviewing a roof damage claim from Bend and microwaving the sad remains of my veggie lasagna. And hey, before I take you down this rabbit hole of family betrayal, dusty secrets, and one very particular watch, I just want to say this. If this story speaks to you, please hit that like button, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that their voice and their time matter. Let's begin. The call came at 2:17 p.m. I remember the exact minute because I was about to forward the quarterly regional damage report to my manager when my phone buzzed. Unknown local number. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail. But something made me pick up. Trisha Dalton? The voice on the other end was gravelly, but careful, professional. Yes, who's calling? My name's Frankie Morales. I run Westside Pawn and Gold over on Gleasan. I believe I have something that belongs to you. There was a pause. A Rolex Submariner. My blood froze. That couldn't be right. That watch was in my desk drawer. I spun in my chair, yanked the bottom drawer open. The stack of Post-its, the Altoids tin, the little leather box. Gone. I had it right here. I kept it locked. You still there, ma'am? I swallowed hard. The watch, I whispered. It's gone. I was afraid of that, Frankie said gently. Look, I think there's something you need to see. Something I'd rather not explain over the phone. Can you come down to the shop? I didn't even log out. I grabbed my coat and ran. The parking garage felt like it was spinning. My hands were shaking as I unlocked my Civic. I kept telling myself it was a mistake. Maybe someone borrowed it. Maybe I'd misplaced it. But no, that wasn't just a watch. It was my watch. It was Dad's watch. The only thing he left specifically to me. I used to check it every day. Not because I needed to know the time, but because running my fingers over the words etched on the back had become a ritual. To my daughter Trisha, may time always be on your side. Love, Dad. He'd worn it every day. Through every roofing contract, Sunday barbecue, piano recital. Even during chemo, when his wrist got too thin and we had to add another hole to the band. On his last day, he called me close, pressed it into my palm and whispered, "This is yours, Trish, only yours. Promise me you won't let anyone else wear it." That was 3 years ago, 2 years before Mom remarried, 18 months before Mark Ellison moved in with his fast-talking, app-starting, credit card-maxing son, Chase. I merged onto I-84 with my heart in my throat. I remembered the day Mom asked if I wanted to move out, not because she needed space, but because Chase needed a room to code in. I remembered how she'd called it sharing. No, this wasn't sharing. This was stealing. And if they had stolen this watch from me, what else had they taken? Next, I walk into a pawn shop on Gleasan and see the past staring back at me from inside a glass case. Westside Pawn and Gold sat sandwiched between a shuttered vape store and a check cashing place with neon bars flickering open like a last-ditch plea. The kind of strip mall where hope is transactional and everything has a price, especially desperation. I parked crooked and didn't bother fixing it. My hands were still trembling, keys clutched tight, like my fingers didn't trust the world anymore. The bell over the door jingled as I stepped inside. The air was a stale cocktail of worn leather, air freshener, and something faintly metallic. Behind the counter stood a man who looked like he could bench press a Buick. Thick-necked, weathered skin, gold pinky ring glinting as he flipped through paperwork. His gaze lifted, sharp and assessing. But when he saw me, something shifted. The skepticism faded. "You're her," he said, nodding once. "Trisha Dalton." "Yes, Frankie Morales." He stepped forward, his voice softening. "You look like him. Your dad, I mean." I blinked. "You knew my father?" Frankie gave a short chuckle, like the memory had a weight of its own. "He used to come in now and then, years back. Construction guys, always short on cash between jobs, need tools, float a payment. But your dad? One of the rare ones. Always paid his loans on time, never tried to hustle me. That sounded like Dad. Quiet, straight shooter. Frankie disappeared into the back for a moment. When he returned, he was holding a leather box. Familiar, scuffed at the corners, just like I remembered. He set it down gently, like it was sacred. "This came in yesterday," he said. "Guy who brought it in claimed it was his. Clean. Said he was trying to raise capital for his startup." My stomach turned. Mid-20s? Talks fast? Overconfident? "Yeah," Frankie nodded. "Wore designer sneakers with no socks. Said his name was Talish or something." Chase. Of course it was Chase. I opened the box. There it was. Dad's Rolex Submariner, lying in the velvet like it had been waiting for me. It looked smaller somehow, more fragile. I reached for it slowly, my breath catching as I lifted it. The weight was the same, but something in me felt heavier. "I almost processed the sale," Frankie said, watching me. But the second I opened it, something felt wrong. "Your dad came in here once 15 years ago, pawned this exact watch. I checked the records. Took a loan for $3,000, paid it back with interest within 3 weeks. 15 years ago, I echoed. That's when I started at St. Margaret's. The numbers clicked. The tuition, even with my scholarship, had been crushing. Dad said he picked up extra jobs. Never once mentioned he hawked his most valuable possession. Frankie nodded. He didn't want you to know. But when this came in again yesterday, same serial number, I couldn't shake it. I figured something wasn't right. But that's not the only reason I called you. He held the watch up and pressed a small indentation on the side I'd never noticed. With a quiet click, the back of the Rolex popped open. I gasped. "That's not standard." "Nope," Frankie said. "Someone modified it. Carefully. I've handled thousands of watches. I've never seen anything like this." Inside was a folded piece of paper, the size of a postage stamp. "I didn't read it," he added quickly. "Figured if your old man hid something like that, it wasn't meant for me." My fingers trembled as I unfolded it. The handwriting was tight, neat, unmistakably Dad's. "Trish, if you're reading this, something's happened to the watch. Go to Pacific First National, safe deposit box 312. The key's in my toolbox, inside the level. The watch is yours, but what's in that box? That's your future. Don't let anyone tell you different." "Dad." I stared at the paper so long my vision blurred. "Trisha?" Frankie's voice sounded far away. "I need to buy the watch back." He hesitated. "Technically, you don't have to." I looked up, confused. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "The kid wanted $8,500. I didn't file the paperwork yet. Was gonna log it this morning, but something told me to wait." "You're just giving it back?" Frankie's jaw flexed. "Your dad. He helped me out once. My kid needed surgery. I was short on rent. Your father came by, did the entire roof at cost. Let me pay him off over 6 months. Never mentioned it again, not once." I felt tears building. "This," he said, pushing the box toward me, "is me squaring the debt." I reached out slowly and closed the lid. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll keep it close this time." He smiled gently. "Some things aren't meant to be shared." As I walked out into the weak Oregon sun, the box tucked tightly against my chest, one thing was clear. This wasn't just about a stolen watch. It was about everything that had been taken, quietly, over time. And somewhere in the back of my father's toolbox was a key to something bigger, something meant for me. By the time I got back to my car, the Rolex felt like it weighed 5 pounds in my hand. I couldn't stop glancing at it. At the familiar gleam, at the worn leather box, at the tiny ridge on the side where the back had popped open like a secret finally exhaled. Dad had hidden something in here. Not just a message, a direction, a next step. And suddenly, the air in Portland felt different, thinner, sharper. Like every minute that passed was ticking louder than the last. The drive to Mom's house was muscle memory. I barely noticed the turns. All I could think about was the toolbox, the old red Craftsman that still sat in the garage, under the dusty tarp where I'd insisted on storing it after Dad passed. Mark had wanted to toss it during their garage decluttering spree. Chase called it vintage junk, but I'd held my ground. Not because I knew it was important, but because something in me wasn't ready to let go. Now I understood why. I pulled into the driveway like I had 100 times before, but this time, I didn't feel like I was coming home. I felt like an outsider approaching enemy territory. The front door was slightly ajar. I could hear voices coming from the kitchen, Mom and Mark, murmuring over what sounded like paper shuffling. Bills, probably. Or maybe another investment proposal from Chase. I took a breath and walked in. Mom looked up first. Her eyes widened. Guilt flickered across her face, quick and sharp, before she rearranged her features into soft confusion. "Trisha? Honey, what are you doing home this early?" I didn't answer. I stepped into the kitchen, slowly, and placed the Rolex, still in its box, on the granite counter between us like a chess move. Mark leaned forward, squinting. "Is that—" I stared directly at Mom. "Looking for this?" Silence. Mark cleared his throat. Where did I find it?" I cut in, my voice steady, low. "The watch you stole from my desk. The watch you pawned to fund Chase's latest fantasy. The only thing my father left me." Mom flinched like I'd slapped her. "That's not fair," she whispered. "No," I said. "What's not fair is that I checked that drawer yesterday morning, like I do every morning, and today it's gone. And then a man I've never met calls me because someone tried to sell him my dad's watch. Said the guy talked fast, wore designer shoes, bragged about an app." "Trisha? It was Chase, wasn't it?" Mark held up his hands. "Let's not get dramatic. It was a misunderstanding. He needed liquidity." "For what exactly?" I snapped. "Another blockchain grocery delivery hybrid? Or did he find a way to integrate AI into vintage t-shirt resales?" Mom stepped in, trying to regain control. "He has a plan this time, a business partner, a real model." "Funded by stealing from me," I said, voice cold. "From Dad." "It's not stealing," Mark barked. "We're a family. Families share resources." "Funny," I said. "I don't remember Chase sharing his trust fund when he leased that Tesla, or flew to Cancun for that networking retreat." Mom's jaw tensed. "That's different." "How?" "Because Chase has potential," she snapped. "He's building something. You work a job. You save. You don't need—" There it was, the unspoken truth, finally in the open. Because I didn't dream big enough, because I didn't fail publicly enough, I didn't deserve anything. Not even what my father left me. I leaned in, calm and deliberate. "I want the money back. Every cent of the $8,500. Mark scoffed. "It's gone. Already invested." "Then uninvest it." "That's not how startups work," he said, laughing bitterly. "I filed a police report this morning," I said quietly. "I have the case number. If I don't have the money within 5 business days, I'll submit it. That watch was stolen, and I will press charges." Mom paled. "You wouldn't." "Chase committed a felony. That's not my fault." Her voice turned shrill. "After everything we've done for you, we let you live here." "I pay rent," I said. "Above market, actually. And I keep to myself. Meanwhile, your golden boy steals from me and you cover for him. Again." She opened her mouth to speak. I turned away. "I'm going to the garage. Don't follow me." The garage was still cold from the morning. Dad's toolbox sat exactly where I'd left it, tucked beneath the old workbench. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. The familiar clang of metal tools greeted me like old friends. And there it was, the Stanley level, yellowed from years of use. The one he used to teach me how to hang shelves straight and never eyeball it if you want it to last. I flipped it over. Inside the bubble chamber, wrapped in a strip of electrician's tape, was a small brass key. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. The next morning, I stood in the marble-tiled lobby of Pacific First National Bank. My coat was damp from the Portland drizzle, the watch nestled in my pocket. The safe deposit clerk was an older woman, probably in her late 60s, with tight silver curls and a kind face. Her name tag said Margie. "I remember your father," she said as she led me to the vault. "Quiet man. Always smiled, even when things looked rough." I swallowed hard. Yeah, that was him. Box 312 was wider than I expected. Margie inserted her key and I used mine. The lock turned with a heavy clunk, and she stepped back. "I'll give you privacy," she said gently. I opened the box. Inside was a large manila envelope, a weathered leather notebook, and a sealed envelope with my name on it in Dad's blocky handwriting. My throat clenched. I reached for the letter first. "Trish, if you're here, that means the watch found its way back to you. Good. It was always meant to. I started this box when you were born. I knew even then you were going to be the kind of person who didn't take shortcuts, who listened more than she spoke, who noticed things other people missed. Inside the envelope are some bearer bonds. My dad gave them to me when I married your mom. Should be worth a good chunk now. The notebook has everything from my business, clients, unpaid invoices, contractor logs. But what matters most isn't the money, it's time. Time to walk away if you need to. Time to start over. Time to stop asking for permission. I'm sorry I'm not around to say this in person, but I'm proud of you. Always have been. P.S. If that boyfriend's still around, the one who borrowed money and ghosted you, dump him. You deserve better." I laughed through the tears. Even from the grave, Dad didn't miss a beat. The envelope held 5 bearer bonds, totaling $100,000. The journal was packed with names and numbers, people who still owed Dad for work he did before his diagnosis. One entry jumped out. Hamilton and Brooks Construction. Outstanding, $16,250. Still in business, still local. They probably assumed the debt died with him. They were wrong. There's something strange about returning to a house after the illusion of safety has been ripped away. The walls look the same. The furniture sits right where you left it. But everything feels off, tilted. That's how it felt walking through the front door that evening. Except this time, I wasn't creeping in with my guard up. I walked in like I owned the place. Because I did. At least I had for a long time. The one who cleaned up after holidays. The one who paid rent. The one who stayed quiet to keep the peace. Not anymore. The air inside was thick with the scent of coffee and cinnamon candles. Fake comfort. Mark and Mom sat at the kitchen island, bent over Chase's latest pitch deck, a glossy tri-fold brochure that looked more like a party invite than a business plan. They didn't hear me at first. Then I set the Rolex on the marble countertop, hard. The sound made both of them jump. Mom turned around. "Trisha!" Her smile faltered. "We weren't expecting you back so soon." I folded my arms. "You pawned the only thing Dad ever left me, and you did it behind my back." Mark stiffened, straightening his posture like he was gearing up for a boardroom defense. "Now hold on. This isn't how it looks." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh? Because from here it looks like someone snuck into my room, stole the most important thing I own, and sold it for cash to fund Chase's fantasy." "It wasn't stolen," Mom said quickly. "It's your house too. We just—" "No," I cut in. "I pay rent. Utilities. I don't touch your things, but you felt entitled to touch mine." Mark reached for the watch. "It's just a watch, Trisha." My hand shot out, snatching it back before his fingers got close. "Don't!" He pulled back. "We didn't think you'd notice right away. We were going to explain." "When? After the IPO?" I scoffed. "When Chase rang the NASDAQ bell and thanked his mom, stepdad, and random investor who unknowingly paid for the logo design?" Mom opened her mouth, but I kept going. "I found a letter hidden in the back of this watch. A letter from Dad. He left me a key, a bank box, bearer bonds, Mom." My voice broke on that word. "He planned something for me, something just mine, and you tried to sell it like it was yours to give." Mark's jaw tightened. "We needed startup capital. You have a steady job, a 401k, savings. You're not hurting." "I'm not hurting yet, but you made sure to test the limits, didn't you?" I stepped closer. "You chose to take from me instead of your own son. Why?" He looked away. I turned to Mom. Why, Mom? Her voice was barely above a whisper. Because Chase is trying. He has vision. And I don't? You don't dream the way he does. You're safe, reliable. There it was again, the old undercurrent. I wasn't loud enough to be seen, wasn't reckless enough to be praised. So because I don't burn through money and fall on my face, I don't deserve to be protected? I asked. Dad worked his whole life to give me something solid. He built a future for me, and you pawned it off like it was a spare toaster. Mom reached for my hand. Sweetheart. I pulled back. Don't. Mark stood. All right. How much do you want? I stared at him. What? Name your price. Let's resolve this like adults. I blinked. You think this is about money? Isn't it? No, Mark. This is about trust, about respect, about the fact that I've been invisible in this house since the day you and your overgrown frat boy moved in. His nostrils flared. Don't talk about my son like that. Then maybe teach your son not to commit felony theft, I said, because I've already filed a police report. If I don't get the $8,500 back, plus interest, I press charges. Mom gasped. You'd send your stepbrother to jail? I looked at her for a long, heavy moment. He's not my stepbrother. He's your son, and I'm done paying the price for your choices. She whispered, After everything we've done for you. No, I said. You've done things to me, not for me. I turned to leave, the Rolex clutched in my palm like a compass finally pointing north. As I walked out of the kitchen, I heard Mark mutter under his breath, She's always been dramatic. I paused in the doorway. No, I said over my shoulder. I've always been quiet, and you took advantage of that. But I'm not quiet anymore. Upstairs, I grabbed a duffel bag from my closet. Essentials only. Laptop, bank records, the letter from Dad. I didn't take anything I didn't need, because I already had what mattered. My future. In the driveway, I sat in the car for a moment, letting the engine idle. Mom came out, arms crossed, a mix of defiance and desperation on her face. You're really leaving? Yes. Where will you go? Someplace where my boundaries mean something. She tried one more time. Your father would be ashamed. I met her gaze through the windshield. Calm. Clear. My father would be ashamed that it took me this long to walk away from people who never saw my worth. Then I backed out, turned onto the street, and never looked back. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't always come crashing in like a hurricane. Sometimes it creeps in quiet, like mildew behind wallpaper. You don't notice it until the structure is already rotting. That's what the kitchen confrontation had confirmed. And now, all that was left was dust and distance. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't owe anyone closure. I slipped out the side door, down the 2 concrete steps, and into the garage, into his space, the only place in that house that hadn't been touched by Mark's minimalist makeovers or Chase's startup paraphernalia. It still smelled faintly like sawdust and motor oil. Dad's world. Mine now. I flicked on the overhead light, a dim yellow bulb that hummed like it was remembering something too. The garage was cold, not just from Portland's late winter air, but from time, from absence. His workbench stood in the back, right where we'd left it 3 years ago, covered in a thin sheet of dust, and the kind of respect no one ever says out loud. I knelt beside the rusted red Craftsman toolbox and unlatched the top drawer. The hinges creaked like bones waking from sleep. Everything was still there. His tools were arranged with a precision that made my heart ache. Each socket wrench, each screwdriver exactly where it belonged, like they were still waiting for him to return from a coffee break. And then I saw it, nestled between the level and the tin of roofing nails. His Stanley, yellowed plastic edges, faded black numbers. The bubble slightly off-center like it always had been. Dad called it the truth stick. Said levels didn't lie, even when people did. I sat back on my heels, the cold cement biting through my jeans. Holding the level felt like holding his hand again, steady, patient, calloused from decades of roofing and raising a daughter alone. He taught me how to use it when I was 8. We'd been hanging shelves in my bedroom for my book collection, mostly Ramona Quimby and Goosebumps. I kept wanting to say, "That's close enough," but he wouldn't let me. He'd smile and say, "If you're gonna build something to last, Trish, you take your time. You check the line. You get it right." Funny how those words meant more now than they ever did then. I turned the level over slowly, running my fingers along the edges like I was tracing memory. And then, I saw it. A tiny strip of black electrical tape, barely visible near the end. I peeled it back carefully, breath held. Tucked into the curve of the bubble chamber was a small brass key, taped down flat and wrapped in a clear bag. Old, but still gleaming. It was real. It was still here. I exhaled shakily. This wasn't just a key. It was a promise. One my father made long before cancer, long before Mark or Chase or the word irrelevant ever got thrown in my direction. It was the kind of promise that said, "You matter. I see you, even when others don't." My phone buzzed in my back pocket. A text from Mom. "Please don't do anything you'll regret." I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Because I wasn't doing anything out of regret. I was doing it out of clarity. I tucked the key into the inside pocket of my coat, zipped it tight. Then I stood in the middle of that cold garage, surrounded by memories that had weight and worth, and I whispered quietly to the air, "I'm gonna get it right, Dad. I promise." The next morning, I was standing at the front desk of Pacific First National Bank. A polished brass plaque gleamed behind the receptionist, and the marble tile floor clicked beneath my boots as I shifted my weight. The woman at the counter, mid-60s, warm smile, name tag that read Janet, took the key from me with reverence. "This was your father's?" she asked gently. "Yes," I said. "He passed away 3 years ago. Left me something, quietly." She nodded. "Your dad was one of our clients for over 20 years. Never missed a payment. Always came in with this little notepad and a pencil behind his ear." My throat tightened. That sounds like him. "Come with me." As she led me through a thick steel door into the vault hallway, my heart was pounding again. Not from fear, not anymore. From readiness. From something waking up in me I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Ownership. Box 447 was heavy in the wall. She slid her key in. I slid mine beside it. A click like thunder in the silence. "I'll give you privacy," she said. I nodded. She left. I pulled the box from the wall and carried it to the little booth table with velvet walls and a single chair. I sat down slowly and opened the lid, and there it was. The envelope, the notebook, the second letter. But that part of the story? That's what comes next. The door to the private vault room clicked shut behind me, sealing out the world like a closing chapter. The silence inside was thick, cocooned by velvet walls and soft lighting that made time feel suspended. Like I wasn't in a bank anymore, but somewhere between past and future. Box 447 sat in front of me, cool steel still holding the warmth of my fingers from carrying it. I ran a hand over the lid slowly, like tracing the top of a tombstone. It wasn't just a box. It was a lifeline buried in metal, time-stamped by love and foresight. This was it. I opened it. Inside, neatly arranged, were 3 things. 1. A sealed manila envelope, thick and weighty. 2. A weathered leather-bound notebook, worn at the edges. 3. A single envelope with my name written in blocky, familiar handwriting. I stared at it for a long moment. Trisha. Just my name. No sweetheart, no love you always. Just clean, direct, Dad's style. I took a breath and opened it. "Trish, if you're reading this, then the watch made its way back to you. Good. That means you're paying attention. That means you're ready. Your mother doesn't know about this box, and that's intentional. I started it the year you were born, because I knew, even then, that someday you'd need something no one could take from you. Inside the envelope are bearer bonds from my father. Should be worth close to $100K by now, maybe more. The notebook is my business ledger. Every client, every job, every unpaid invoice. There's probably another 50K out there if you want to chase it. But this isn't about money, Trish. Not really. This is about time. Time to leave if you want to. Time to stop apologizing for taking up space. Time to stop making yourself smaller just to keep others comfortable. I know your mother sees the world through a strange lens, where the loudest person gets the most attention and the quiet ones get forgotten. But I saw you, Trish. I always did. You were never invisible to me. You were careful, thoughtful, steady. The kind of person who doesn't just talk about building something. They actually do it. So this is my gift to you. Not just money, not just a notebook. It's a reset button. Use it however you want. Start over. Build something. Or don't. Just live like you're not waiting for someone to tell you you're allowed to. P.S. If Marcus is still hanging around, the one who borrowed money and ghosted, dump him. Seriously, you deserve better. All my love, Dad. I didn't cry. Not at first. I laughed. A small, incredulous breath of laughter. Of course he mentioned Marcus. That disaster ended 6 months after Dad died. Ghosted me after draining my savings just until the next freelance check hit. Dad always saw through people faster than I did. I reached for the envelope next. The flap was sealed with that old-school brown clasp, the kind that never sticks the first time. I opened it gently. 5 bearer bonds, $20,000 each. I blinked. That was real money. Money that didn't come with strings, apologies, or explanations. No one knew about this. No one could touch it. For the first time in years, I felt something shift inside me. Not rage, not panic, just space, room to breathe, room to choose. Then I picked up the notebook. It was heavier than it looked, filled with pages of handwritten notes, contractor agreements, receipts folded neatly and tucked between pages. Every job he ever did. Some entries had check marks beside them, paid in full. Others were circled in red. Hamilton and Brooks Construction, outstanding balance, $16,250. Timothy Vaughn, deposit received, job never paid Kepler Roofing Supply, late credit balance, $3,190. They were all still active companies, names I'd seen on signs across the city. Probably assumed the debt died when he did. They were wrong. I traced the red circle around Hamilton and Brooks' name. I remembered Dad coming home the week after that job, limping from a ladder fall. He still finished the job on time. They never paid. I flipped to the back of the notebook, scribbled there in pencil, "If something happens to me, don't let them off the hook. A job's a job. Paid work deserves paid respect." I sat back in the padded chair, heart pounding, not with fear this time, but something sharper. Focus. Resolve. This wasn't about revenge. This was about restoration. About finally collecting on what Dad had earned and what had always been mine. I closed the box carefully, slid everything back into place, and stood. As I stepped out of the vault room, Janet looked up from her desk. "Everything all right?" I smiled for the first time in what felt like days. "Yeah," I said. "It is now." I didn't go back to the house. Not even for my toothbrush. I booked a room at a modest boutique hotel near Laurelhurst Park, the kind with exposed brick walls, quiet hallways, and just enough charm to make you forget the world outside was burning. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. I set the Rolex on the nightstand and stared at it ticking in the soft lamplight. The watch had once rested on my father's wrist through decades of storms, mortgages, and hospital bills. Now it sat beside me like an anchor I didn't know I'd been drifting without. I pulled out Dad's notebook and the folder with the bonds and laid everything across the bed like a war table. This wasn't just about recovery anymore. It was about restoration. It was about setting things right. The next morning, I walked into the office of Shaw and Kendall Estate Law downtown. Clean space, modern lines, hardwood floors polished to a shine. A receptionist in sleek black glasses took my name and offered coffee. I declined. My adrenaline was enough. A few minutes later, a woman in her late 40s stepped out. Gray blazer, calm face, eyes like a hawk. "Trisha Dalton?" "Yes." "I'm Rebecca Shaw. Come on back." Her office smelled like lemon and steel. I liked her already. She sat, crossed one leg over the other, and opened a fresh notepad. "So, tell me everything." I started from the beginning. Dad, The watch, the hidden letter, the bearer bonds, the unpaid debts in the notebook, and the theft that had set it all off. I didn't cry, I didn't rage, I spoke clearly, deliberately, like my father taught me. Rebecca didn't interrupt. She only nodded at key moments, underlining things in her notes with surgical precision. When I finished, she leaned back and looked at me over her glasses. "Your father kept immaculate records," she said. "This ledger alone is gold. Every signature, every date. I've handled estate claims for over 20 years, and this is rare." I exhaled. "So, it's actionable?" She gave a small, firm smile. "Very." "What about the bonds?" "Clean. Bearer bonds are old school, but still valid. You can cash those immediately." "And the outstanding debts?" I asked, pointing to the notebook. "Hamilton and Brooks owes over 16 grand. He completed the job. They ghosted him." She nodded. "That's breach of contract. Most likely they assumed the debt died with him. They're wrong. Oregon law allows heirs to pursue business receivables on behalf of a deceased family member's estate, even if probate was informal." I blinked. "You're saying I can legally collect?" She opened a desk drawer, pulled out a packet. "With a retainer and a few signatures, I can have letters of demand sent to every client on this list by Friday. Some will fold immediately. The ones who don't, we sue." "What about legal fees?" I asked. "We'll structure it so the fees come from what we recover. You won't be out of pocket." It was so clean, so possible. For a moment, I just stared at her. "I thought this would feel like revenge," I admitted. "But it doesn't." "It isn't," Rebecca said. "It's justice. There's a difference." I left her office with a signed contract, a folder of paperwork, and something else I hadn't carried in a long time: momentum. Back at the hotel, I stood in front of the window and watched the city breathe. People down below rushing to lunch, dogs being walked, horns honking, life going on, as if my world hadn't just turned upright again. I called my friend Elena that night. She'd been my college roommate, the kind of person who remembered your coffee order and your trauma anniversary. She answered on the second ring. "Trish? Oh my God, are you okay?" "Yeah," I said, voice cracking a little. "Actually, I think I'm better than okay." She listened as I told her everything. When I paused, she said something I didn't expect. "I'm proud of you." I blinked. For what? For not letting them shrink you, for stepping up for your dad, for finally taking the damn wheel. I smiled through my tears. It took me a while. "It's not about when," she said gently. "It's about if, and you did. That's what matters." The next morning, I wired a portion of the bonds into a separate account, set aside a portion for taxes, another for legal fees. The rest? I earmarked for the next chapter. Where I was going next, emotionally, geographically, even spiritually, I wasn't sure yet, but I knew where I wasn't going. Back. I didn't knock. I walked through the front door with the kind of quiet finality that made both Mark and Mom look up from the living room like they'd just seen a ghost. Chase was there too, spread out across the coffee table like a tech bro staging a product launch, wires and diagrams scattered next to a can of Red Bull. He grinned when he saw me. "Hey, Trish, I was just about to—" "Save it." My voice was calm, not angry. Calm is worse. Calm means you've already decided. I walked past him and into my room, packed my duffel, laptop, chargers, the folder from the bank, the Rolex, Dad's notebook, the clothes that mattered, left behind the noise. The whole thing took 10 minutes. Mark followed me into the hallway. "You're overreacting," he said, arms crossed like this was a budget negotiation. "Really?" I zipped my bag slowly. "Because from where I'm standing, you stole from me, dismissed it, then tried to minimize the damage like I was a financial inconvenience." "We thought it was for the greater good. Chase's company is not my problem," I cut in. "It never was." Mom appeared in the doorway, her face pale, mascara slightly smudged. She looked older than I remembered. Maybe I'd just never really seen her before. "Trisha, you don't have to do this," she said softly. "This is your home." "No," I replied. It's your house. There's a difference. Chase stood awkwardly by the kitchen island, arms folded, looking like a child caught stealing snacks before dinner. Look, he said, I didn't mean for it to go this way. I was going to pay you back once the app goes live. We're talking Series A funding in a few weeks. I'm not interested in hypotheticals, I said, tossing my backpack over one shoulder. What I'm interested in is a check for $8,500 plus 7% interest, or a court date. Your choice. He blinked. You're serious? Dead serious. My lawyer will be in touch. Mark scoffed. A lawyer? You're going to sue your own family? I turned slowly to face him. You're not my family. You're my mother's second husband, and you taught your son that stealing was acceptable, as long as he called it a business pitch. Mom stepped forward. Trish, sweetheart, don't do this. You're letting money get between us. I stared at her. It wasn't money, it was trust, and you let them take that too. The silence stretched. I could feel it in my throat, my chest, the backs of my eyes, but I didn't cry. I looked around one last time, the photo of us on the fireplace, Dad, me, Mom, still untouched. Dad would be ashamed, Mom said suddenly, like a dagger meant to stop me mid-step. I froze. Then I looked her dead in the eye. No, he'd be ashamed it took me this long to walk away from people who never saw me as enough unless I was useful. She opened her mouth to speak again, but I was already heading for the door. As I reached the porch, Chase called after me. Trish, I'll make it right. I swear. When the app hits, I turned slowly. No, I said. You'll make it right now, or my lawyer will do it for you. They watched me walk down the front steps like I was walking off a cliff. But the thing is, when you've already been pushed, stepping away is the safest thing you can do. I got in the car and sat with the engine running for a long moment. My fingers wrapped around the steering wheel, the watch on my wrist ticking like a second heartbeat. I didn't look back. Look, not at the house, not at the porch, not at the people who watched me go like I'd betrayed them when all I'd ever done was stay too long. 2 days later, Chase's Series A startup filed for bankruptcy. No product. No user base. Just a burned-out co-founder and an unpaid developer who posted screenshots of their Venmo requests online. Mark called a week after that, left a voicemail asking if I could help out with a little loan while they get back on their feet. I didn't call back. Mom tried the guilt route. Through a cousin, then an aunt, then a family friend I hadn't spoken to since my high school graduation. Each time, I sent the same response. A photo of the police report. Chase's name highlighted in yellow. The messages stopped. I moved into a small house not far from where Dad grew up. White siding, blue shutters, a backyard with room for tomatoes come spring. The garage is mine now, the workbench too. I mounted Dad's level above it, still perfectly straight. The Rolex lives on my nightstand. Sometimes when it's late and quiet, I open the hidden compartment just to reread the letter, to remind myself that he saw me, that he prepared for the moment the world would try to erase me, and that he gave me the tools to say no, to draw a line, to walk away. The first deposit from the bearer bonds hit my account 2 weeks later, $127,000. Even after taxes and legal fees, I had breathing room, real breathing room, for the first time in my adult life. No more budgeting between paychecks, no more quietly splitting dinner tabs and pretending I wasn't counting. No more covering Chase's half of the utilities when he forgot to Venmo me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was stepping into the life my father planned for me. Rebecca Shaw, my lawyer, called the same day the transfer cleared. Good news, she said, voice crisp, efficient. We've recovered $43,000 so far from unpaid contracts. 2 more clients just caved after getting our formal demand letters. I blinked, stunned. Already? Your father's documentation made it easy. Every signature, every invoice, every timestamp, airtight. I've never seen a contractor keep records like this. The man could have audited the IRS. I laughed. He always said if you're gonna work with your hands, your paperwork better be stronger than your hammer. Well, she said, his hammer earned him interest. One by one, the names in Dad's red-circled ledger fell like dominoes. Hamilton and Brooks Construction, $16,250. Paid in full via certified check. They tried negotiating at first, claimed a verbal discount. We sent them a scanned copy of Dad's final signed invoice. Their attorney folded within 72 hours. Vaughn Interiors, $7,500 recovered. The owner, now retired, said he thought Dad had forgiven the balance. We sent his handwritten note, balance due by Friday. Vaughn apologized and wrote a personal check. Kepler Roofing Supply, $3,990 in late credits refunded. I never even had to speak to them. Rebecca handled it all. By the end of month 2, we'd recovered over $56,000. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about Dad. About every hour he worked that no one wanted to pay for. About the way people looked at him like he was just another contractor. Blue collar, replaceable. He wasn't. And neither was I. I took a portion of the recovered funds and did something simple but profound. I paid off every cent of my student loans, logged into the portal, clicked Pay Balance in Full, and watched the number drop to 0. I wish I could say I cried. I didn't. I just sat there, hands still, staring at the screen, letting the silence fill a space that used to be occupied by debt. I also closed the shared credit card Mom had added me to back in college, the one she used when Chase needed to build credit. She texted me later that day. Cards declined at Trader Joe's. Something wrong? I replied, no, something's finally right. She didn't respond. A week later, I visited the county clerk's office, transferred the title of Dad's old work truck into my name. It had been sitting in the driveway, unused for years. Chase had wanted to flip it for parts. Instead, I had it towed to a shop, restored the engine, replaced the tires, and gave it a matte navy finish. I drove it the following weekend. Windows down, elbow on the ledge, radio playing Dad's favorite Creedence song. It wasn't fast. It wasn't flashy, but it was honest, solid, just like him. I used the rest of the funds to buy a modest craftsman-style house in the East Moreland district, close to where Dad grew up, close to where his roots still whispered through old sidewalks and cracked curbs. The house needed work. A roof patch, some plumbing, the kind of projects Dad would have called weekend warm-ups. But it had a good foundation, good bones, just like me. My first night there, I sat on the floor of the living room with a folding chair and a lamp. No furniture yet. Just me, the Rolex ticking on my wrist, and Dad's notebook on the floor beside me. I wasn't thinking about revenge, or what Mom and Mark were doing, or how Chase was faring without a dime or a business plan. I was thinking about the sound of Dad's boots on the back porch, the way he always poured his coffee before sitting down, the way he measured twice, then one more time just to be sure. I could still hear him saying, "You build slow, Trish. Slow lasts." There was one last envelope in the notebook I hadn't opened until that night. It wasn't legal, it wasn't financial, it was personal. Inside was a photograph, Dad and me standing in front of his old pickup truck, both of us in matching flannel. I must have been 9 or 10. On the back, he'd written, "The world may forget what you build, but never forget who you built it for." I stared at those words until the lamp buzzed, the light flickering like a nod, like approval. The air smelled like cut grass and old pine when I stepped out onto my porch that evening. Late summer in East Moreland had a way of wrapping the streets in gold, soft light catching on the leaves, long shadows stretching like open arms. I sat on the porch swing barefoot, a glass of iced tea sweating in my hand, and watched the sky dim by degrees. The house behind me creaked gently in the heat, the way old homes do when they're finally settling in, like bones shifting into rest. It had been 4 months since I moved in. 4 months since I walked away from a house that pretended to be a home and finally stepped into a life that was mine. Not perfect, not polished, but mine. The porch light flickered on, and I reached for the notebook. My father's notebook, still worn, still smudged with the work of someone who never cut corners, especially not for his daughter. I flipped to the last page and found a note he'd written near the bottom margin. "One day you'll understand why I never let go of that watch." I do now. Earlier that week, I got a voicemail from Mom. No guilt this time, no anger, just tiredness. Hey, Trisha, just wanted to let you know your cousin Emily got in to read. She asked about you. I didn't know what to say. Long pause. Anyway, if you ever want to come by, you don't have to stay. Just thought I'd say that. I didn't call her back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And that was okay. Not every story needed a clean reconciliation. Some just needed closure. Chase texted too. He said he was working on himself. Said he was learning to sit with his mistakes. That therapy was harder than coding. I didn't reply. Some things don't need to be rewritten. Just left on the shelf where they belong. But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't still carrying it. Not the pain, not anymore. But the weight of the lesson, the knowing, that people don't always take from you violently. Sometimes they do it quietly, with smiles, with just this once, with a story that makes you feel selfish for wanting what's yours. And that's why Dad hid what he did, why he etched his love into steel and tucked truth into velvet, because he knew. He knew they'd try to take it, and he made sure that even if they did, they couldn't take what mattered most. Time. Not just seconds on a watch, but the freedom to decide how to spend it, who to give it to, who not to. I ran my thumb along the face of the Rolex on my wrist, now slightly looser from the weight I'd lost. I didn't wear it to show off. I wore it because it reminded me of who I came from, who I was before I got buried under other people's expectations. Last week, I got offered a management role at my company, a big step up, higher pay, more pressure. I turned it down, not because I couldn't handle it, but because, for once, I didn't want to take something just to prove I could. I've started volunteering at a nonprofit that helps women reclaim assets lost to domestic financial abuse. Some of their stories echo mine. Some are far worse. But the through line is always the same. Someone told them they didn't matter until they gave something up. Now I sit with them, week after week, and help them find the pieces they were told were worthless. Turns out those pieces are gold. Tonight, I'll go to bed with the windows open. I'll leave the fan running and let the hum lull me into sleep. The watch will sit on my nightstand. Dad's toolbox in the garage. His level mounted on the wall like a compass that never failed. And I'll remember, I was never asking for too much. I was just asking the wrong people. So if you're watching this, wondering if you have the right to take your time back, to draw a line, to start again, this is your permission. You don't have to burn bridges, but you're allowed to stop crossing ones that only lead to hurt. You're allowed to say, this ends with me. And maybe, just maybe, quiet doesn't mean powerless. It means measured. It means ready. It means lasting. Just like the life I'm building now. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of something or someone you need to reclaim, please like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs it. And in the comments, tell me, what are you taking back today? Because the world may try to write your story for you, but trust me, your time is yours, always has been.